Over the last few years of working in crypto, I've accrued more NFTs and altcoins and random crypto assets than I can count across more chains than I can remember. And it's always been a struggle to find a single crypto wallet where I can track everything I own. That is, until I discovered Zerion. Zerion Wallet is for everything you own on chain. Yes, that includes all of your assets across more than 14 different networks. Zerion is giving people the chance to be true owners by making it simple to explore, collect, mint, test, and contribute to the new internet. Go to zerion.io/download today to take ownership over your on-chain assets, available on iOS, Android, and desktop. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Rehash a Web3 podcast. I'm your host, Diana Chen, and today we're speaking with Birb, aka Chairman Birb Bernanke, aka Bone Condor on Twitter, all about the new Bitcoin ETF and best security practices in crypto. Birb started her career in TradFi and was a product manager for a number of years before joining OtterSec, a blockchain security audits company. We start out by talking about the Bitcoin ETF, and Birb patiently answers a lot of my very basic questions like, what is an ETF and how is it different from index funds? Before we move into some more interesting questions like, is this a good move for the crypto industry overall? And what does this tell us about how the SEC will be treating crypto companies in 2024? After we figure out what a Bitcoin ETF is, we get into a discussion about security best practices for DeFi protocols and other companies building on chain. Birb shares her best pieces of advice for organizations and for end users to avoid scams and hacks, and gives us an inside look into what really goes on behind the scenes of some of these hacks. This was a really fun conversation that hits on some really important topics, and I think you'll all enjoy listening while learning something new. Birb was nominated by Andy Boyan and voted onto the podcast by Hudson Jameson, Triumph, and myself, Diana Chen. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Birb. So, Birb, Chairman Birb, welcome to the podcast. Unconfirmed whether you are the Fed or not. So we're going to watch what we're saying on this podcast.
Yeah. You never know. You never know.
You never know. So I want to just dive right on into Bitcoin ETF stuff. Obviously, this has been all over the news, whether you're in crypto or not. You've heard about the Bitcoin ETF. My primary knowledge of the Bitcoin ETF is just the SEC's Twitter account getting hacked and then putting hacked, quote unquote, hacked, and then their website going bonkers as well. But can you actually break down what is behind this Bitcoin ETF and maybe just start with the basics, like what the hell is an ETF?
Yeah, I can do that actually. Yeah, so before I was in crypto, I was in TradFi, and one of the jobs I had was I was like the person who answered the phone if you called the brokerage. So for years, I just sat there explaining. Yeah, you say that. I learned a lot.
I'm sure.
I'll say that. I learned a lot. So when you have an ETF, it's basically just a company makes a basket of stuff, and you buy that basket rather than just buying the underlying things themselves. So instead of going out and buying, I don't know, let's say we put together a tech ETF, and instead of you going out and buying Amazon, Facebook, whoever else, the company buys all of those, packages them together, wraps them, and then sells them to you as like a share. So for every one share of that ETF you're buying a little bit of their pool of whatever they've decided should be in that ETF.
Okay, so it's kind of like an index fund.
Yeah, kind of.
Or a mutual fund. How is an ETF different?
So you can have ETFs that are just basically index funds, like SPY, that's technically an ETF, but it's also just tracking the S&P 500. So there's really not that much of a difference, I would say, between an index fund and an ETF, except an index fund is generally trying to track like an index and the returns of that index. I don't know. I don't know how to say it other than index. The S&P 500 is an index. The Dow Jones is an index. Those are just a basket of things. They're measuring something and coming out with a final number, and you're looking at that number and going, is this good or bad or high or low? That is a type of ETF, is an index fund. A mutual fund is a little different. The main thing that's really different about them that matters to like an end user is that one of them trade once a day, and then the other one you can trade whenever, like during market hours. Everyone wants to get really complicated about this and talk about construction of what goes on underneath the hood, and I don't think it matters. The thing at the end of the day that really matters is that if you have shares of SPY, that's the S&P 500 ETF, you can buy those in the morning and sell them in the evening if you want. within market hours. You can buy it at noon and sell it at 1 p.m. With a mutual fund, you're buying it and holding it, and they only trade once a day. They trade after the market closes. So you buy it, you put your buy order in, you wait all day, you get filled that day, and then the next day, you know what you've got. And then if you want to sell it, you have to wait until market closes that day. So they're longer term vehicles. They're just not as liquid to get in and out of. There's other differences, but we could spend all day talking about them and no one would care.
Yeah. Okay, and then ETFs you can trade all the time? Or was that the one that you
So
said you can trade within market hours?
within market hours. So nothing really trades all the time except crypto, but ETFs 9 to 9:30 to 4, whatever the traditional market hours are. They also have extended hours. Really what it is you're letting someone else actively manage what's in there, but they have to follow the rules of whatever they've decided, like this is how this ETF works.
Right.
So someone
Okay.
buying the ETF could be anyone. If you're like, I just want to buy an index fund and put it in my account and set it and forget it, go buy an ETF. My mom has ETFs. I own ETFs. They're just a product.
I'm getting FOMO now. Why do I not have an ETF? Okay, and then what is a spot ETF? Because they're calling this Bitcoin ETF a spot ETF.
Okay, I might get this wrong. I
Okay.
don't think I am, but I might get this part wrong. So if I get it wrong, just cut it from the podcast.
Yeah, we won't put this part on chain.
So the reason there's been controversy about this, and I'll get to why they're different in a minute, is that things like Bitcoin futures ETFs have existed for like years. And really what that means is that there's different instruments that you can contain within this ETF, right? So within it, there's ETF companies, there's people that are packaging these things. They were buying, the Bitcoin futures, wrapping those up, putting them in an ETF. So that way anyone who didn't know how to buy futures or their mandate wouldn't let them buy futures, things like that, could still get access to these ETFs. Spot is just the companies buying the Bitcoin themselves rather than like a futures contract on it. So people were upset because the spot ETF, aka the just go buy the Bitcoin and manage that part yourself, wasn't being allowed for some reason, even though the futures ETF has already existed. And what's really the difference? People were also upset, and Grayscale in particular was upset because they have this thing called the GBTC, the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust. And what it is basically, it's trades like an ETF, but it's not technically an ETF. It's its own like secret third thing. But they had this box essentially where they were buying Bitcoins. If you gave them money, they put Bitcoins in the box and you could buy shares of the box. And what they really wanted to do was be able to like redeem those or give them back because people wanted their cash. So when you wanted to take your Bitcoins out of the box, you wanted to get your money back, but they couldn't redeem them. So they were just holding this box of Bitcoin basically. And the SEC said, you can't redeem this for cash. You can't do that. And that's why everyone was upset about it. No one understood the reasoning, like why? Like there's already futures ETFs, there's already all these other things. Why not this? And the SEC really didn't give clear guidance on it. And that's what got overturned, where they were kind of forced to be able to, like, you have to give them better reasoning, and they didn't come up with better reasoning. And now we have explosion of ETFs.
Gotcha. Okay, so how has this Bitcoin ETF been performing so far? And we're recording this on January 16th. So I believe it came out, 5 days ago?
I think it's been a week.
A week, more or less. It's been out for a little bit, not too long. How have we seen the performance so far?
I think people have been a little surprised. I think people thought it was going to shoot to the moon. Everything was going to go up only forever. We'd made it. And it hasn't done that. I actually think it was down a little bit. But I think people are just surprised by this because they just thought, oh, well, people are just going to be loading in and buying, not realizing that everybody thought that. So why wouldn't you sell the news? So it's been not as high or low, I think, as people thought it would go. But
buy the rumor, sell the news is what they say, right?
That is what they say. But if everybody does that, and that's what everyone's going to do, why wouldn't you do that, So
right. No, that's true.
That
so what do you think this means for the crypto space, that we're having these TradFi institutions that are now embracing Bitcoin in this kind of a big way, I would say? What do you think that means for the future of crypto and regulation and all that stuff?
This is a spicy question. I'm kind of two minds about it, and I don't know that I've reconciled how I feel. On one hand, I think it's really good. You're getting this adoption you talked about. You're getting things done in the way everyone's talking about with doing regulation, and everything is the right way. But at the same time, are you just letting big institutions co-opt and take over this thing that was supposed to be free from institutions? Like, that was totally against the point of the white paper of Bitcoin, of having the government selling ETF. I don't think that's what like Satoshi wanted. But I don't necessarily think that's good, right? Like, sure, you have grandmas buying Bitcoin now, but is that the world we wanted for this? I don't know. And I don't know what that means for the future, you know?
What do you think? Are you willing to sacrifice some of the core principles of crypto in order for it to reach the mainstream so that we can maybe at least get to the mainstream and then re-educate them about the core principle?
I mean, I don't necessarily think it's bad. I just wonder if that's actually what's going to happen. You know, sure, maybe we get all of this adoption to the masses, but if it's only in this one way and this one time, and then anything else takes them time to re-understand and relearn, why would they? Like before, at least you had to learn about why can't I just buy Bitcoin from my bank? And that kind of led you down this rabbit hole of what is Bitcoin, what is crypto. Now it's just like, oh, I'm going to buy Bitcoin from Schwab. And there's no kind of further, what is the point? So I don't know how much, you're right. It's a trade-off between losing the core values versus getting more people. And there's probably an acceptable trade-off there, but I don't know where it is.
Do you think a fair analogy would be like if you were looking for a job and you were to lie a little bit on your resume in your cover letter? Not lie, but just like
tweak the truth.
Tweak the truth a little bit just to get your foot in the door. And then once you get your foot in the door, then you have a chance to explain yourself. And at that point, it's easier because you're face to face with them. You can show how charismatic and friendly you are. And they're more willing to listen to your the truth instead of your tweaks lie. That sounded way better.
Maybe. But if you're starting off with a lie, I don't know how trustworthy that makes you in the end. I guess.
True.
So maybe don't lie on your resume. Anyone listening to this. Everybody, I think, does lie on their resume.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's a lot of things where people, they really want to have this strong, good opinion and a great little soundbite, but I have no clue how it's going to play out, and I don't know if it's going to be good or bad. Kind of scares me.
It does, yeah. Well, if you had to give your best guess, since you are the chairman of the SEC on crypto Twitter, what moves do you expect the SEC to pull this year?
Okay, if we want me to make some predictions about what's going to happen in this year, I have one that I really think is going to happen. And I don't necessarily think that this is because they've done anything wrong or not, but I do think I would expect to see the SEC come after Coinbase more than they already have, because now, they're doing things, maybe against their will, maybe not in the way they wanted to, but stuff is happening. And if you're still going to be overly antagonistic to the SEC, then it's going to come back your way. So I would expect okay, we're going to do this. Show me that you're following every single rule. Show me all of the compliance, and really making sure that they're staying with it. So I would expect to see a lot of probably fines come out for non-compliance of stuff that no one cares about. There's going to be some Binance gets fined for improper record keeping. Yeah, I think it's just going to start to be a stream of stuff like that. And either that's going to get taken as, look, this whole industry can't clean itself up, or it's going to get taken as they actually survived and now we're figuring out a better way. So it's kind of a pivotal moment, I think.
It's almost, if I'm just trying to be optimistic here, but the optimistic view of that would
I'm sorry, don't mean to be so depressing.
No, we knew you were a doomer before you came on the podcast.
I didn't mean to be. I'm sorry. I'm
just kidding. But if we were to take an optimistic view of what you just said, we could almost say that it's maybe a good sign if the SEC were to come after Coinbase or Binance, for example, for the petty little things like improper record keeping that didn't actually affect anybody or impact anybody negatively. Because we could say that that's showing that the SEC really has nothing of substance to go after crypto companies for, that now they're just going after the petty little things that nobody cares about because there's nothing of substance. That means we're surviving. That means we're proving ourselves in the space. And
I do think you're right on that. It can mean that okay, there's nothing anyone cares about. Once the details are no longer like this salacious STX orgy of crime, then yeah, nobody cares as much. Honestly, TradFi institutions get fined millions of dollars a year for the same stuff. And no one's out there writing these huge articles about how Goldman shouldn't exist because it gets fined for keeping records for more than 4 years. No one except the SEC nerds, and Matt Levine is writing about that. So
shout out Matt Levine.
Shout out Matt Levine. I love Matt Levine. That is not meant to be a negative, but he might be one of the only people that cares about that.
Speaking of hacks, big thing in this space, you are now working at OtterSec, which does blockchain audits.
Yes,
right?
security audits.
Security audits, mostly with DeFi protocols?
We do a lot of different stuff, actually. There's a good mix of DeFi protocols in there. There's alt1 blockchains. We've worked a lot with MetaMask snaps. So there's a lot of stuff across the spectrum of what you can do in crypto that we kind of touch.
Gotcha. Okay. So if you were to think about all the audits that you've done for all of these different DeFi protocols, MetaMask, all of these, could you identify certain categories of bugs that you most commonly find in your audits?
I'm going to break this down in a way that's making anyone technical listening to this kind of mad.
That's fine because most of our listeners aren't very technical.
That's good because this isn't a technical way of answering this question. I think there's kind of three main buckets of hack, if you will. And just stay with me on this one. There's things where it was very obviously the people building it's fault. You know, a dev messed something obvious up. Something was not coded right and should have been, and it was obvious. Or there's users don't pay attention to something and they mess something, which sounds like I'm victim blaming, and maybe I am a little bit. But if you're on Solana, for example, and you sign a transaction, it shows you exactly what's going to happen with all of your coins in your wallet. So if you click one button and it says all of these coins are going to go away, don't click that, you know, don't click that. I don't know. So I can't make that one any simpler than user issue. And then there's this secret third thing of maybe it wasn't really a bug. It was more of an economic exploit.
Okay.
So there's kind of like really obvious bugs, really obvious user just not paying attention. And then like, maybe this wasn't actually a bug, but it still hurt people. Like Mango, for example. What happened with Mango wasn't a bug. It was an economic exploit using flash loans and things like that. And they took out all the money, but the code wasn't actually wrong. User didn't do anything wrong.
So it's really the three buckets are the first one is the devs effed up. The second one is users effed up. And then the third one is where a hacker comes in, a bad actor comes in and
takes advantage of something. Yeah.
Okay.
Which, I mean, then you have a bad actor in all hacks, obviously, but something like a governance attack where it's someone buying all of the tokens and then voting and doing something. Is that really a hack? I don't know, but it's definitely something that's still effective.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. And then when you say the devs effed up, if you're coding a DeFi protocol or whatever, how much room is there to be like, this code is less secure, or this code is more secure?
It's not as just like easy as secure or not secure. If that's where you're going, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it was sounding like it wasn't so binary as like secure or not secure. It sounded like there's more of a spectrum. I was just wondering how big that spectrum is, and
you know, it's pretty big. I would say when it comes to code, there's always going to be some way that someone can find to attack it. Like if you are unfortunate enough to have North Korea get a hold of your protocol and it's their job to sit there and poke at it and find a way to get in until they hack it and make money, otherwise they don't get to go home that day. They're going to find a way to hack the protocol. It happens in TradFi. It happens in everything. We see it all over the place, but there's definitely a level of if that's not what's happening, your codes can be safe. And even sometimes, like, yes, your code can still be safe enough but really what I'm saying is that if someone stares at your code long enough, they will find something. And that's true of everywhere, regardless of if it's crypto or elsewhere in the world. So when we do things like audits, what we go through and look for is it's not just like all bugs are the same. It's not like, oh, this bug can lose millions of dollars in funds. This bug just means it doesn't load right. We don't view those with the same level of importance. So you get things like critical bugs where we'll report like, we found some way of exploiting this where it'll lose all your money. And then it goes down a spectrum from there to less critical to kind of just like, hey, this weird thing happens sometimes with your code and maybe it leads to a transaction reverting. You can go through that and kind of be like, well, we're going to fix all the really important stuff because we have to. And that is good enough maybe. Or, you know, then you go down the list and you start getting the less important things. And by the time you're to the stuff that's just like informational, maybe you don't fix it. Maybe it's not worth fixing, but it's not really going to matter. So we look at things from more of a criticality standpoint of if this went wrong, who would this affect and how much? And it becomes like a risk management thing rather than you're safe, rubber stamp, good to go forever.
Yeah. Is part of the process too, like actually trying to hack your clients?
It can be.
Just to see what is hackable.
Yeah, absolutely. OtterSec is really interesting actually because it didn't start as just like guys wanting to do security reviews. It started as a team of white hat hackers that do a bunch of like capture the flag. Like they try to hack stuff all the time. So one of the things we offer is that like, yeah, we'll go in and try and white hat or black hat. We'll break your code however you want us to try and break your code. You just have to want us to do that.
Yeah. So within that third bucket of economic exploits, there's actually a bad actor coming in doing some sophisticated hack. Are there certain buckets of hacks that you see most commonly take place?
I think what really happens a lot of the time is that there's some new novel thing that everyone's like, whoa, I didn't know that could happen. And that's kind of the biggest hack. And then everything else from there kind of falls in the second category of like copycat hacks where people are like, oh, you can do XYZ. And we found that out based on this huge hack. What if I apply that same principle to 40 other DeFi protocols? And then all these things end up getting hacked in the same way until someone else does a brand new one we've never heard of. And the cycle kind of continues.
Yeah. Is that what DeFi protocols actually do? Like when they see that one DeFi protocol has gotten hacked, once they find out what the hack was, they'll go and try and hack themselves or replicate it or fix their codes.
Good ones do.
Yeah.
Good ones do.
I mean, I would think, like, as a non-dev, I would think, oh, like, they got hacked. Let me go and make sure we can't get hacked in the same way.
Yeah. And how we fit into that is that we have ongoing relationships with all of our clients. Like, it's not like, oh, you did an audit with us. Okay, bye. We're not friends anymore. So we all kind of personally stay up on like, hey, there's a new hack that's happened. It might affect you because of X, Y, and Z. There was just one, I don't even remember the details of the hack, but it was something on a lending protocol. And we reached out to every lending protocol we've ever worked with. And we were like, here's what happened in this one. Make sure that your code doesn't do the same thing. Now, if they actually follow up on that or not, there's nothing we can do about it. But if your security guy comes to you and says, you got to fix the security problem, you're pretty likely to fix the security problem.
Yeah, no, you should definitely do it. So other than replicating hacks that you see exist, other than hiring OtterSec, what are some other best practices that DeFi protocols or any kind of crypto app should be following to make sure they're super secure?
That's a good question. There's a lot of things you can do, right? And everyone wants to roll their eyes at this, but like, how many people do you think listening to this don't actually have 2FA turned on? Like for their logins.
Yikes.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, the SEC didn't.
The SEC didn't. So I think really going back and making sure that you've covered all your basics, you're not going to get SIM swapped or something, goes a long way. And then staying up to date. There's channels like ETH 911, which is an Ethereum coalition of security-minded people that responds to incidents when they happen. There's channels that put out all sorts of great content. And I think it's really about making sure that you stay up to date with what's broken in crypto and what's not, and reading about hacks and making sure that your stuff can't get hacked in the same way. Super important. Also, in my opinion, I don't think that people should be getting, this is my opinion, this isn't like my employer's or anything like that, but I don't think you should just be getting a one-time audit and then being like, we're good, we've been audited, we're done. Code gets more complex every day. People find new ways of doing stuff every day. If you don't have some sort of ongoing relationship with a security partner, you're not going to have one until you need it. And by the time you need it, it's too late.
Yeah, that's true.
Finding a team, it doesn't necessarily even have to be OtterSec. If you don't like us, okay, there's other ones, but make sure you're getting your stuff audited by somebody. Yeah. And I think there's a really big problem right now with smaller protocols that want to get audited, but they can't necessarily afford the audit. So they're kind of left in this space of like, do we launch without an audit and just hope nothing goes wrong? Or do we try and scrape together all this money for an audit that we can't really afford? And I'm personally trying to come up with ways for chains themselves and L1s that people are building on to sponsor the audit hours themselves. Because if you're building out like a new ecosystem or something, you should want everything on there to be secure. And you should be willing to help the little guys building on your L1 or your ecosystem or whatever it is. You should be willing to help them if they can't help themselves. So there's things in the works there that I'm working on and others are working on. And hopefully some chains will have some more auditing bandwidth soon.
Doing the Lord's work.
Doing the Lord's work.
Honestly, though, like we cannot have mainstream adoption if people keep getting hacked and scammed and losing their money.
If grandma is any percent worried that her money is going to get taken, you're never going to get grandma using a DeFi.
Yeah, and grandma will for sure lose all her money if she.
And grandma will lose all her money. My grandma would lose all her money. So
anyone's grandma, grandma will lose all their money. Going to the user side, you mentioned SIM swapping. I recently saw someone tweet about how you shouldn't include your phone number on Twitter because that's an easy way for them to SIM swap you. But Twitter also doesn't let you use any of their features if you don't give them a phone number. So can you explain how can SIM swapping still take place on Twitter, for example, if I have 2FA turned on?
I don't think so.
Okay.
but I'm not like the expert on SIM swapping. It's my understanding that the way SIM swapping works is that like someone gets a hold of your phone number. They find out kind of what services are attached to it. They go to like AT&T or whoever, T-Mobile, and say like, oh, I got a new phone, switch my number over to this. And then they get the like 2FA and whatever. But I'm pretty sure that if you've got all these things turned on so that people can't even get into them, then you're fine.
Okay.
Or at least
and then
like
other
I know
than
T-Mobile has like a thing where like you can't SIM swap over the phone or something. So if you have T-Mobile, I think, call them and tell them, you know, don't let anyone SIM swap without me being present with ID. Why that's the thing that people don't do all the time is beyond me, but I don't know why you
I think I just assumed that you would have to like go and show your ID and verify
you would
that
assume,
you are
but
who
I'm
you
pretty
say
sure
you are.
This is how this happens, is that they just, you know, socially engineer it.
Okay, so other than having 2FA turned on, what else should every user be doing to protect themselves?
Okay, another very, very obvious one. Before you click a link, look at where that link is actually going. Look at where the link is actually going. Make sure it's the place you want to be going to. And before you sign a transaction, actually just look at what you're signing. I know that sounds so basic and so like, yeah, everyone knows that. But I've signed transactions without really looking at what I'm signing, you know? So pay attention to what you're looking at. And chances are that's enough to stop you from actually getting drained.
Yeah. No, my sister got all her NFTs stolen out of her wallet a while ago because she was just clicking on MetaMask, like sign. I mean, it's all gibberish anyway, right? This was like maybe a year or two, a couple years ago, probably. Everything's gibberish. And so she thought she was buying an NFT and she just went sign, and didn't look at the links that it was leading to or anything. And it was wrong. Another thing, actually, I'm going to give you a real world scenario that just happened
I'm ready.
to me this morning. So somebody DM'd me, and knowing that I'm a Pudgy Penguins holder and love Pudgy and stuff, and said, hey, there's this new airdrop you can claim if you're a Pudgy holder. And it was to this site that I had never seen before, which is not saying much. I mean, there's new things all the time that I've never seen, but I'd never seen it before. And then I clicked the link because it's somebody I trust. I click the link and it takes me to basically my browser blocks the page. It says like it's like insecure or whatever, one of those messages. And so then I go back and I'm like, is this a scam? And they were like, oh yeah, you need like you have to have a VPN turned on to like Canada or Europe, or it just like won't work in the US. And so I mean, first confession is I don't have a VPN, which is really bad because I'm always on the road. So I'm going to fix that. But now I'm like, what do I do? Like, I feel sketched out. Why doesn't this work in the US? But then it's somebody I trust who said that they claimed it and it was all fine.
So with stuff like that, I honestly would be, go look at the Discord. Like, if a Discord's not talking about it, at least for me, when it comes to airdrops at this point, as soon as anyone says airdrop, click this link, my alarm is like flashing.
Right.
Because it's the thing everyone's doing now. It's these phishing links. So you get an airdrop and they hope you get excited and don't pay attention. But if you go to look at a community and no one else in a community is talking about it, probably a good sign that it's not real. Or
like the Pudgy community, right? In this case.
Right. Like if you went to the Pudgy Discord and you were like, hey, is this an airdrop like we actually qualified for? Someone else probably would have been like, actually, that's fake. That happens to me all the time.
Okay.
Because I get a lot of those. Or, you know, it's good that your browser blocked it. And looking at kind of why it blocked it is probably pretty good too. Yeah. Something, I will say, it was clear. Something in you somewhere didn't feel like something was right because you didn't just click it and go through with it. So I think paying attention to your gut and figuring out like when something just doesn't even like feel right or if it feels too good to be true, like listen to yourself. It probably is.
Yeah. Or I just think like worst case, I lost out on some money that I could have gotten.
Right. Big deal. I mean, I know that sounds bad and like, yeah, it's life-changing money for some people, but like if it's life-changing money for you, you should especially check that it's real first.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, good advice. Cool. Well, I want to dive into some Twitter questions because we have a ton. And
this should be fun.
This should be fun. I'm going to try to filter on the spot as we go through and maybe not read every single one because some of them are quite wild. Like, is it vegan? Which is a shout out to your other
The answer to that is no. The answer to that is no.
It's not.
It's not.
Okay. So does that mean vegans can't be part of your community, your West Ham community?
No, vegans are welcome. That's just the entrance question.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you have to reply
You have
no
to
to that
well,
question in order to get in.
you don't have to reply no. You have to reply with whatever you think the answer is, and then everyone else gets to judge you for your answer.
Okay. And if people don't know, I mean, you can say, I don't know how much you want to say about your West Ham community, but you can say whatever you want to say.
They're an interesting group of guys. There's girls there too. I don't know why I call them all guys, but it kind of started as a group chat for people that weren't in other group chats and has really spiraled into something way bigger than that. Like, we're hosting a party in East Denver now. And we have
What?
portfolio companies. Somehow, it's really been an interesting group to be a part of. It's a really good way to immediately get a pulse on what's going on in crypto. Like, you hop in there and it doesn't matter what time of day it is. Someone's talking about something. Something is happening. Someone is on something, and it's very vibrant. It's
How many people are in it and how do you join?
how many people are in it? Let's look. I believe it's 125.
Okay.
And
How do you
how
join?
you get in is you ask me, and then you wait and hope we decide to let you in. Yeah. There's a lot of...
Seems very democratic.
It is not a democracy. Tim is an authoritarian dictatorship. No, it's
Glad
not.
we cleared that up.
Yeah, no.
Disclaimer.
Disclaimer, it is not not an equality for all group. I am the Lord. So is Lawrence. No, it's really not that bad. We try to add people that we feel will be like a good fit with the people that are already there. And also, like, the people that are already there will like the new person. It gets really difficult really quickly because people get really hurt. They're like, why am I not in? I'm like, well, you've never asked.
Yeah.
So, the first thing you should do is ask.
Do you think I would be a good member of the community?
We've actually talked about it. And
Really?
yeah, someone brought it up the other day.
Who?
I have questions for you about it after.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But there was some debate. So
So some people don't want me in there.
No. It's not that people don't want you in there. It's that they weren't
Okay.
sure that you would be comfortable in there.
Oh.
So it's not... There have been maybe 3 people where people have been like, fuck that guy, we're not putting him in here. Everybody else is kind of just like, are they going to think we're weird? Because the answer to that is yes, they are weird.
Okay. Yeah, but that doesn't mean I wouldn't enjoy it just because I think you guys are
No, for
weird.
sure. That's why there was...
Okay, let's talk after. Let's talk
We'll talk.
after. Let's get to the Twitter questions. I'm going to go with Andy's questions first because he was the one that nominated you
Also,
and got
thank
you on the
you, Andy.
podcast. So thank you, Andy. So first question from Andy is, are we all criminals at heart?
No.
Good. I agree.
No, some of you are. Some
Yes.
of you are, and some of you are really trying to do the right thing, and sometimes it's really hard to tell who's who.
That's the best answer I could have thought of. Another question from Andy. Who are some potential main characters for this next cycle?
Ooh.
That's a good question.
I really hope it's finally Justin Sun's turn.
To go to jail?
Yes, to go to jail.
Okay.
I'm assuming that's what he means by main character. If he means something else, then I retract that question.
Yeah, I guess you could read that either way, good or bad.
I kind of read that as like, who's the next like SBF
Doom or Birb,
type?
Doom or Birb, back at it.
Sorry.
What if you put on
jeez.
your optimism shoes and reread that question?
If I put on my optimism shoes and reread that question, I kind of think Solana is about to get a lot more attention this cycle than it has previously. I mean, they've had attention, they've had adoption, they've had good UX. All of Solana is great. I think they're about to get a lot more eyes on them than they've had so far.
Nice. Good thing we have Caitlin coming on the podcast later this season. Solana Maxi to shill us all on Solana.
Good thing for Caitlin.
Can't wait. Okay, one more question from Andy. What is the highest value community or marketing activity that you think a security/infra project in crypto can do at early stage and mid to late stage?
The best
Highest value community or marketing activity.
Talk to your users. Talk to people in the community. There's a lot I notice of people who, how do I put this nicely? They sit at their computer all day and they do code, right? So they're just doing their coding and they come up with this persona almost for all of the people using them or interacting with them or whatever. And it becomes this, I know better than they do. I'm the one coding this. I talk to your users, especially when it comes to security. Talking to them about the latest hacks, things that are happening, that wins you so much more than like stale marketing content of just, we're going to be on a spaces. Just talk to people. Don't treat them like they're some outsider, I think, and you'll pretty much find success. All of the best protocols I see that really have a strong community is because the people that are building are in there talking to people about what they're building and trying to make it better based on what the people who are using it are saying. So talk to your users is really a long answer to that.
I don't know how many people I've had on the podcast who've said that exact thing. And for some reason, it seems like people building in crypto just don't like talking to users.
So I used to be a product manager, and one of my roles was really like user feedback and going and talking to users. And it's frustrating because you work so hard and you build this thing and you think it's going to work exactly like you've built it, because how could it possibly not? And then you throw it out into the wild and you see people just abuse it. And it becomes this like, I'm so mad. Like, what do you mean? And it can spiral out of control like really quickly. I do think there should be some separation, and like maybe not every single dev needs to be like, you don't need to argue with your user. You don't need to do that. You don't need to go that far. If it gets that heated, just like log off. But talk to people.
Do you think some of that could be prevented if the devs talked to users before they started building?
Probably. And if everybody didn't read everything in the most like aggressive confrontational tone they possibly could all the time. Like,
wait, so you're saying not everyone on crypto Twitter is trying to fight with you all the time?
I am actually saying that as someone who fights with people in crypto Twitter sometimes. Not everyone's trying to fight with you.
Only Birb.
Only me.
Dictator Birb of West Ham.
Dictator Birb. I've really come on here and just proven the whole doomer thing like totally correct, haven't I? Gonna have to go like do a lot of soul searching after this about.
There's nothing wrong with being a doomer.
I am more optimistic on the space as a whole than like I sound. Like I'm still here for a reason, you know?
Okay, here's another question. Give you a chance to prove that. Okay. This one is from 0x Renegade. They said, what is the current state of regulations in crypto on NFTs, tokens, DEXs, DeFi, perps? And what are the consequences for those who ignore these regulations?
The regulations right now maybe don't make a ton of sense and are clumsy and are definitely a first attempt at going in the right direction. The consequence for trying to go outside of these bounds is probably jail. Sorry.
Actually, this was a question I wanted to ask earlier when you were talking about how you think the SEC is going to go after Coinbase again this year. I was going to ask, do you think the SEC is still, at least in this year or this cycle, still focused on big actors like Coinbase and Binance and not worrying about the small people? Or do you see them starting to come after all of these small guys, like all of these DAOs or all of these smaller projects that maybe don't have the most robust legal backing because they were like, well, we don't know.
Yeah, not only they not know, it's much easier for the SEC to go after like 3 guys than it is to go after like Coinbase. Yeah, no, I actually think that's a really scary thing to point out. I mean, there's been things like the Uki DAO where like no one even knew
that's
who
what
that
I was
really
just thinking.
was. Sorry to anyone that actually was an Uki DAO. I just thought it was. But
now everyone knows.
Now everybody does. Yeah, no, I think it's going to be a mix. I'm sort of wondering if maybe the SEC feels like they're losing the crypto fight. By all means, it kind of looks like they are. But none of this regulation keeps going their way. So I do think we're going to see less antagonistic. You're just going to go to jail because crypto bad, and more focused on maybe bad actors within crypto. That's at least my hope. I hope they go after the right people because those are the people that we should be getting rid of.
That was a surprisingly optimistic take.
I'm trying. I'm really trying. I
can tell. Okay, I'm happy to hear that. Another question from Ivy. What's the worst thing you would do for Taylor Swift tickets?
Oh, huh. There's not much I wouldn't do for a Taylor Swift concert ticket. Like, those are not cheap. And I've heard she puts on a hell of a show, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, I've heard they are great performances. And she does, like, 40 little outfit changes. Like, that's a lot. That's talent.
I have no doubt. I just have no desire to personally witness it. I'm happy.
I don't have a desire to pay for the ticket.
Yeah.
But I might have a desire if people are like, I'll do XYZ. I don't know what XYZ. I don't know what like my
What would you do?
Would
That's
be.
the question. What's the worst thing you would do for free Taylor Swift tickets?
Probably stuff I can't say on a podcast.
I
actually don't know. I don't have an answer here. That's a really hard question. Like, what wouldn't you do? I don't know.
I mean, me personally, I wouldn't do anything because I wouldn't.
Okay, what would you do for Beyonce concert tickets? Like,
ooh, okay, that's a bit more enticing.
Mm-hmm. What's the worst thing you would do for free front row Beyonce tickets?
Steal them?
Okay, that's a good answer. I would steal them. I would steal them. I would steal the tickets.
I mean,
that's
I
wouldn't
what I would go out of my way to, but if somebody dropped them in front of me, I might pick them up.
If someone dropped them on the street, they might not like find them again. Yeah, that's
all I'm saying. Yeah,
it's maybe you should
finders keepers.
Yeah,
losers weepers.
Code is law.
Yeah. Buy the rumors, sell the news.
I think what they're
Wow.
saying is the concert tickets are on the ground. They're on the ground. Code's law. I can pick them up, right?
Exactly. That's how I interpret code is law.
That's code is law. Just means whatever I want it to mean, honestly.
Yeah. Okay, last question from Twitter. This one's from orb_net. Worst trade ever, best revenge trade you've made.
Worst trade ever. It's a tough one. 2017, I was buying NVIDIA calls and I turned like $1,000 into like $25,000. And I was like, I'm going to keep doing this because I'm a genius. What could go wrong? But yeah, the next week I lost all of it in one go.
So what is the lesson we learned from that?
Hedge my trades better.
Are you one of those people that's like, for instance, if I'm buying ETH or whatever, are you one of those people that's like, you have to set a price for yourself that once it hits this price, I'm selling?
No.
What's your strategy? So what's your strategy?
My strategy is basically vibes based. Like, I know that I'm not just
and
clicking
this,
buttons.
everybody, is how you lose $25,000.
No, what happened there was that I just kept buying calls and I was like, well, it's got to go back up eventually. And it turns out like, yes, but after your calls expire. So I should have just hedged that and done some sort of spread and like there would have been no problem. I was just an idiot. I look for things I think are undervalued. I do kind of look at like, if it hits around here, I'm done. That's a recent development because I started getting too greedy on all of my trades and being like, well, I want more out of this. So I kind of am more like, what did you expect to get out of this trade? Like, did you expect it to? Most things aren't going to 20x. So if something's 10x, you should probably take half of it off the table rather than once it hits here, I'm out.
Yeah. How do you know what that number is?
That's a good question. There's a lot of things I look at, but I don't know that I could distill this down into something someone else could follow in like 5 minutes. When I look at a shitcoin, I kind of look if it's already dumped and if it's consolidating around stuff or if it's just free falling, like maybe then you shouldn't buy it versus, I don't know, it looks like it's kind of holding this level. Maybe it'll go back up. My best revenge trade was actually because of something like that, where I bought it at a penny and I sold it for a lot more than a penny. So, but I sold it a bunch for less than I bought it for at first. And then I was like, I know I'm still right. So I just kept buying it and it worked out. Anyway, I realized halfway through that I hadn't answered part of it.
Yeah. So I have always said that I'm going to hold my Pudgy Penguin until I'm able to sell it and have a down payment on $1 million home.
That's a pretty reasonable way of looking at that one.
You think? Okay.
Yeah.
I was wondering what your take was.
Well, okay. So I think actually the other side of this is when I am in a trade, I will, if I get down far enough, just decide the trade's done. So, if you're holding a penguin and like, okay, maybe it won't ever be a down payment on a house, but if it falls below where you bought it, are you still going to hold it after that? That I think is a real question. Like, what happens?
How do you answer that?
That's a you question. That's not something
it's a personal question.
It's a personal question. I actually really do think this. People want to talk all the time about how you can standardize trading and blah, 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 and take your emotion out of it and don't make it personal. I think that's the total wrong way of looking at it. It's your money. It's your trading. You can really only put on trades that you can sleep with. If you put on a trade and you can't sleep at night because you put it on, it's not a good trade. Doesn't matter how well it does in the end. If you couldn't manage yourself through it, when you get freaked out and sell it early, is that a good trade? Probably not. So, I mean, I think a lot of things come back to people's emotion. And personally, I feel worse when I lose money, but not as bad as I do when I lose out on when I close a trade too early. So I would rather lose a little bit of money than close a trade too early and then watch it run. But that's not necessarily how everybody else feels.
Yeah. It kind of depends what your risk tolerance is. Exactly. It sounds like you have a higher risk tolerance than maybe some other people.
Very much so. And I'm comfortable with that. But I think, when it comes to things like, oh, is this going to go to $1 million? I mean, I don't know that anyone can know the answer to that. But if you've got a reasonable place where you're like, if it hits here, I'm done. And if it, falls to here, I'm done. Then I think that's a perfectly fine way of looking at a trade.
All right. Great. Okay, last question. This is one I'm asking every guest this season. I don't know how many will actually answer it, but our first guest answered it, so hopefully you will as well. The question is, it's a 2-part question. The first part is, will ETH/Bitcoin reach its all-time high in 2024?
Bitcoin will, ETH won't.
Whoa.
You like that?
I was not expecting that. For some reason, I didn't even think of that as an option. Just thought they're both going to reach all-time highs or not. Is there an explanation to that, or you just want to leave it at that?
I'll give you some price targets and no explanation.
That was the second part of my question. What will be the high price for Bitcoin and ETH this year?
Here, I think we do see a new all-time high in Bitcoin. I don't know if we stay there very long. I don't think we hit like 100,000 like people are saying.
What's the current all-time high for Bitcoin?
I want to say like 69.
Okay.
Right?
Of course it would be 69.
ETH is like 48 something and then Bitcoin is 69. I wouldn't be shocked if we saw like 75 for Bitcoin. I would be shocked if we saw 100.
And then what about ETH?
I would be shocked if we saw over 4,000 in ETH.
Wow. Why? Why are you saying these things?
I'm sorry. That said, I do think Solana hits all-time highs. That's another. And I think probably Polygon. But now it just looks like I'm shilling my bag. I'm not.
Okay, no, but explain this. Why is ETH not reaching an all-time high when Bitcoin, Solana, Polygon, everybody else is?
If your first introduction to crypto is Bitcoin and you go in through Bitcoin ETF, everyone's talking about Bitcoin, whatever, fine. Okay, so everyone's buying Bitcoin. And then your next experience is Ethereum and you start paying for gas and you realize how quickly it sucks. I think you're more likely at that point to either go, okay, let me look at all of these L2s. Realistically, it's probably fragmenting liquidity, right? That's a whole other topic. Or you go look at other chains. So you're either not on ETH layered like mainnet or you're not on ETH at all. And I think that just means like the price isn't going to go up as much.
That's fair.
Now, that being said, I do think 2025 will probably be better.
Why is that? Isn't gas just going to keep getting more and more expensive?
I don't know that I know enough about how the gas works on Ethereum to answer that honestly. But I think I still believe in kind of the Ethereum devs. I think what they're doing is smart. I think some of the things like they've talked about doing to fix gas might work. I just think that this might not be their year. Okay. If they can get everything they want to done, yeah, we'll see new all-time highs in Ethereum. But I don't think they'll get everything done this year. So
okay. All right. We'll see.
I'm not calling for the death of Ethereum.
I understand. Nobody go after Birb.
Please,
but if
God.
people do want to go after Birb, can you tell people where they can find you if they want to follow you and where they can go to learn more about OtterSec and West Ham and anything else you'd like to plug?
Yeah. So my Twitter handle is Bone Condor. That's BONECONDOR.
What's the meaning behind that, by the way?
Lots of people ask me about this. It's actually just a really stupid joke about my last name that I tried to turn into an options joke and it stuck. So my last name is Cohen. In college, I started going by my last name backwards because this was when everybody on Facebook was like, your employer will find your Facebook and you won't get hired because I am older than I look. But so I started going by Mihawk and it just kind of like stuck as a nickname. And then that turned into like online is like, okay, a knee is a bone, a hawk is a bird. And I was like, okay, bone and bird. Like, and that's where it started. And then I was like, well, there's an options trade called an iron condor. And I was like, well, a hawk is a bird, a condor is a bird. And now I'm making like a bone. It's not like funny when I explain it to everybody else, but that's where it comes from.
Got it. No, I get it.
It just like stuck. I don't know.
Yeah.
So now here I am. So yeah, you can find
Bone
me on
Condor.
Twitter,
Bone Condor on Twitter.
OtterSec at osec.io. That's OSEC.io. And we are not the feds. And yeah, that's all I got. West Ham, you'll have to see screenshots on the timeline. That's all I got on that one.
Awesome. Well, Birb, Chairman Birb, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And we will be back again next Thursday with another episode of Rehash. Thank you for tuning into this episode of Rehash. Rehash is hosted, produced, and edited by me, Diana Chen, and sponsored by Zerian, Tally, and Quest. Rehash is also supported by our community of NFT holders who curate our guest lineup each season. To get involved, head over to our website at rehashweb3.xyz and collect this episode as an NFT. Anyone who collects an episode becomes part of the Rehash community and will be able to nominate guests for future seasons. Collectors will also be able to tune into our recordings live at pleaser.house and hear our episodes early and unedited. To learn more about how to become a guest on the podcast, go to rehashweb3.xyz/podcast. And to learn more about sponsoring the podcast, go to rehashweb3.xyz/sponsor. Finally, be sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at rehashweb3 or on Warpcast or Lens at Rehash. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.